Good morning. Well, in the previous class, we discussed about research design, okay, where we discussed extensively on meaning of the research design, okay, the meaning of the research design and its importance, and also the need for research design, and also we discussed what are the features of the good research design, features of the good research design. And also we discussed about the important concepts that are to be known before we go for research design. For example, what are dependent variables, independent variables? We should be in a position to differentiate. What are continuous variables? What are discrete variables? That also we should be in a position to differentiate. Then what do you mean by the extraneous variable? What is confounded relationship? What is research hypothesis? And what are experimental and non-experimental hypothesis testing research? And what are experiments? And what are control groups? What are treatments and experiments and experimental units? So these are all the concepts we should know when our setting our research design for our research work. Okay. So today we'll discuss about the different types of research designs, or we call it as different categories of research design. The first category is that research design in case of exploratory research studies. The second one, research design in case of descriptive and diagnostic research studies. Third one, research design in case of hypothesis testing research studies. Okay, these are the three categories of research design. Okay. So in the beginning, we discussed about the various types of researchers. There also we studied about what you mean by exploratory research, what are descriptive research, and what are diagnostic research, okay, what is hypothesis testing. So many varieties of the various types of research also we discussed. Okay. So these things are being broadly classified into three categories. Then what are the factors to be considered, or how do we proceed with these three categories while performing our research studies? Most important. Okay. So we take the first one, that is research design in case of exploratory research studies. Exploratory research studies are termed as formulative research studies. They are also called as formulative research studies. The main purpose of such studies is that formulating a problem for a more precise investigation, or for developing a working hypothesis from an operational point of view. Okay, those are called as the explorative studies or formulative studies, we can call it as. In this, the major emphasis in such studies is on the discovery of the ideas and insights. Okay, the main purpose of these exploratory studies are discovery of the ideas and insights. Okay. As such, the research design appropriate for such studies must be flexible enough to provide an opportunity for considering different aspects of the problem under the study. Understand? So we have three methods in context of this research design for these exploratory studies. Okay? Then you may ask me what are those. The first one, survey of concerning literature. Survey of concerning literature. And second one, the experience survey. Experience survey. Third one, the analysis of insight stimulating examples. Third one is the analysis of insight stimulating examples. Okay. So this exploratory, while performing exploratory research or the formulative research, okay, we need to consider these steps. Okay. So then we'll discuss about the first one, the survey of concerning literature. Okay, that is, we identified a broad area for the research, and also I told you that survey is the only outstanding tool for the research. We never eradicate literature review in any research. Okay, so the concerning to domain, we need to undergo a literature review. Okay, so in the review papers, the many scientists might have used hypothesis, and they have stated the hypothesis statements for their study. So we need to review them thoroughly and evaluate how they have proceeded this hypothesis testing concerning to the exploratory or formulative research. Okay, this is most important. Then second one, experience survey. And also I told you that we should not neglect the resources, rich resources. For example, industry, people who are working in industry, they are very rich resources to provide certain suggestions and guidance for our research. At the same time, we should not neglect the research institutes like Indian Institute of Science, IITs, NITs, many professors involved in research, and most of them, they have spent their whole life in research along with the teaching. Okay, they are the very rich people with respect to research. We should talk to them and discuss with our research problem about our stated hypothesis for our exploratory or formulative research. Discuss with the professors, discuss with the industry people, discuss with your colleagues. Okay, till you will be clear about your research hypothesis or about your research design. And also I told you that the research design is nothing but how to carry out research, what all the resources are required with respect to the material resources, with respect to money resources, with respect to equipments, with respect to machineries, okay, and with respect to institutes, where the facilities will be having, and about the staffs, well equipped people, staffs to perform certain experiments as per our direction, whether the material available indigenously. Sometimes we are expected to procure the material from even from abroad also. We don't know. Okay, when you are carrying out some of the research on smart materials, and when you are carrying out your research studies with respect to the uh, composites, nanocomposites, nanomaterials. Sometimes we may not get the materials locally, may not be available in India. We need to import. What is the cost? Where it is available? It's all to be designed. And what is the time limitations of the research? That all too also to be considered. That's all research design. So with respect to exploratory research, we need to talk to all these factors have to be noted, and we need to discuss with the experienced people. That is called as experience survey. Okay. Then analysis of insight stimulating examples. Okay. So we need to refer some of the case studies or the examples where they have carried out exploratory researches. Okay, don't think that we alone as a research scholar can do everything. No. So reading the published international research, reputed journal papers from the reputed publishers in our domain, okay, gives extraordinary knowledge, extraordinary thoughts, extraordinary feelings about the research. Okay. So take my case. When I was doing my research on supply chain optimization, I was not knowing what is genetic algorithm. I was not knowing what is a new artificial intelligence tools are available in the market. I studied, referred papers. Okay, slowly started understanding the concepts, applications, notations, performance, algorithms, slowly. Nobody taught me all this technology. I learned myself, reading papers. That is first. Contacting the renowned, experienced, rich people at IITs, NITs. Then I gained a grip on my research design. Okay. And also I referred each journal paper gives each case. Okay. So there are a lot of insights we get from reading a paper about our research. Okay. So that is known as those case studies, the case studies which have been considered by other researchers in the world, that will stimulate for our research. That's why we need to read the case studies or the published work by the other rich resource people in the world. Okay, so that will be an stimulating, those papers will be the stimulating papers or the examples for our research studies. Okay, so when I was doing my literature, when I was doing my research, I never left around 10 papers. Always I was keeping 10 papers with me. Related, they are very directly related to my research domain, my research supply chain domain. Okay, the algorithms, concepts, they are directly related, and the case studies they have taken. Always I used to keep with me as a reference material during my tenure of my research work. Okay, whether you believe it or not, still I have those papers. Still I have those papers. All those 10 papers kept in a file, kept in a computer folder. Okay? By using those papers, I have guided the UG students and also the doctoral students. Okay? So, like this, the examples will stimulate, okay, and they give more insight into our research. Then, the second category of research design is in case of descriptive and diagnostic research. That's what we discussed about the exploratory formulative research. Now we discuss about what are the factors to be considered for descriptive and diagnostic research studies. Okay. The descriptive research studies are those studies which are concerned with describing the characteristics of particular individual or a group, whereas diagnostic research studies determine the frequency with which something occurs or in association with something else to establish the relationship between the variables. And also the survey type of studies, they fall under these descriptive and diagnostic research areas. So while doing this, we need to consider these factors. Formulating the objectives of the study, design the methods of data collection, and select the sample size, collect the data, and the processing and analysis of the data, what formulas, what softwares have to be used, and finally the reporting the findings, the outcome of the results, or the outcome of the data, okay, in the form of charts, graphs. Okay, we need to interpret. So these are the things to be followed. And third one, the research design in case of hypothesis testing. Okay, the hypothesis testing research studies, they are also called as experimental studies. Okay, those where the researcher tests the hypothesis of the causal relationship between the variables. Okay, such studies requires procedure that will not only reduce the bias and increase the reliability of the research and will permit the drawing inferences about the causality. Usually the experiments meet this requirement, hence we must talk about the research design very often in case of the design of experiments. Okay, the design of experiments is a subject. If time permits, okay, you read the articles or refer a book about the design of experiments in statistics. Okay, it needs a lot of statistical knowledge, concepts while designing an experiments for research. Okay, so these are the three categories of research designs. Understand? Please note down. I don't know the question. Okay, identify the categories or the classification of research design and discuss each in brief. Okay. Well, now there are another three principles how to be considered for experimental design. I told you, design of experiments. There are three basic principles of experimental design. These principles have been given by Professor Fisher. Okay, in the examinations also they ask what are the three principles of Fisher in terms of experimental design. Discuss like that. Okay, the first principle is the principle of replication, and second one is principle of randomization, and third one is principle of local control. Okay, these are the three principles of Fisherman with respect to experimental design. First one, according to the principle of replications. Okay, the experiment should be repeated more than once. Okay, that is called as principle of replication. Repeat more than one is known as replication. Thus, each treatment is applied in many experimental units instead of one. Okay, they have to be repeated many times. By doing so, the statistical accuracy of the experiments is increased definitely. For example, suppose we are to examine the effect of two varieties of rice. We need to examine the two varieties of rice. For this purpose, we may divide the field into two parts and grow one variety in one part and another variety in the another part. Okay, these two varieties of rices in both parts, different parts. We can then compare the yield of these two parts and draw conclusion on that basis. Okay, but if we are to apply a principle of replication to the experiment, okay, when we need to apply a principle to the replication, principle of replication to this experiment, we first divide the field into several parts. They divided fields into only two parts. Here, as per the principle of replication, divide the fields into several parts and grow one variety in half of these parts and another variety in the remaining parts. We can then collect the data of the yield of the two varieties of rice and draw the conclusion by comparing the same. The results so obtained will be more reliable in comparison to the conclusion and draw without applying the principle of replication. Okay, so the entire experiments can be either repeated several times for the better results. So this what we did, dividing the field into various parts, and half is grown with the one variety and grown with the other variety. It is the one set of data collected. So this has to be repeated 3-4 times to get the accurate result or to overcome the bias in the first set of result. That is called as principle of replication. The second one, principle of randomization. Principle of randomization. So this provides a protection when we conduct the experiment against the effect of extraneous factors by randomization. Okay, we defined what do you mean by the extraneous variable. Okay, when the experiment consists of extraneous variable. Okay, what do you mean by extraneous variable? I taught in the previous class. It is the variable, it is independent variable that is not related to our study. It is an independent variable. It is not concerned to our study actually. But it may affect the dependent variable of the study, of my research study, our study. Okay, this variable not in the purview of our research. We are not considering this variable as our research variable, even though this variable will affect the dependent variable of our research study. That is called as extraneous variable. Okay. I repeat once again, the principle of randomization provides a protection when we conduct an experiment against the effect of extraneous factors by randomization. Yes, it is affecting our research. Okay, then what we should do? In other words, this principle indicates that we should design or plan an experiment in such a way that the variation caused by this extraneous factor can combined under the general heading of chance. We call it as a chance causes. This extraneous variable which affects our dependent variable, we call it as chance causes or chance. Okay. For this instant, you take an example. We grow one variety of rice, say in first half of the part of the field, and other variety grow in the other half of the field. Then it is just possible that soil fertility may be different in the first half in comparison to the other half. See, in the first example, we have considered two parts of the field and two varieties of the rice. That's all. The fertility of the land acts as a extraneous variable which is not in the purview of our research study with respect to the first case. Okay. So to eliminate this extraneous variable, okay, the result which has been obtained in the first case, it is not realistic because extraneous variable was affecting that results. In such situation, we may assign variety of rice to grow in a different parts of the field on the basis of some random sampling technique. In this case, we need to adopt a random sampling technique and we need to make to grow the varieties of rice at the different parts of the field randomly, okay, on the basis of random sampling technique. We may apply randomization principle and protect ourselves against the effect of extraneous factor by conducting randomization process. If we grow the rice in the different parts of the field, okay, we can reduce the effect of this extraneous variable. Then third principle is the principle of local control. Is the another important principle of experimental design. In this, the extraneous factor known as source of variability. Okay, the extraneous variable, it is to be treated as source of variability because it affects our research study. It creates variation in our research study. We need to determine that. Okay, so it may very deliberately or a wide of a range of necessary, and this needs to be done in such a way that the variability it causes can be measured and hence estimated from the experimental error. We can estimate this variability and compensate in our research study as an experimental error. Okay, so that is known as the principle of local control. This means we should plan the experiment in such a manner that we can perform two-way analysis of variance. So to control this extraneous variable effects on our research, we need to use two-way analysis of variance. Again, you refer this statistics book for this two-way analysis of variance so that you will understand better how we can eradicate this extraneous variable which is affecting our research, and in which the total variability of the data can be divided into three components attributed to the treatments. We call it as, and also we defined what is treatment. Okay, and the extraneous factor. Okay, in case of the soil fertility, in case of this our example, and the experimental error. Okay, in other words, according to this principle of local control, we must divide the field into several homogeneous parts known as blocks, and then each such block is divided into parts equal to the number of treatments, and then the treatments are randomly assigned to the parts of the block, and divide the fields into several homogeneous parts known as blocking. Dividing this field into homogeneous parts, we call it as blocking in terms of statistical analysis. And in general, the blocks are the levels at which we hold an extraneous factor fixed so that we can measure its contribution to the total variability of the data by means of two-way analysis of variance. Okay, in brief, though the principle of local control, we can eliminate the variability due to the extraneous factors from the experimental error. Okay, this is the third principle where we can eliminate the extraneous variable by the two-way analysis of variance, and we can eliminate this as an experimental error, and we have the clear, reliable, realistic research variables and its effect on our research study. Okay, so these are all the three principles how to be considered while designing our experiments. Okay, I repeat once again, the principle of replication, principles of randomization, and principle of control are the three principles how to be considered for our research designs. And also I have explained these principles with an example. I hope you will understand better. Still you are not clear, you can ask me, or you can refer the Woolrich book, or you can refer the Research Design Kothari book. And there's a University with You prescribed book. It is for the MTech guys, and all researchers will refer this book. And also the people who are going to take an research entrance. So they have put 50 marks for research methodology subject and 50 marks for in their domain. Then totally they announce the result. So take the question. Okay, take the question. Well, what are the different research designs, categories and classification of the research study? Identify and discuss in brief. I think I already told this question. The second question, what are the principles of Professor Fisher? Professor Fisher has considered for his research while designing his research experiments. Identify them and discuss briefly with an example of your own. Thank you. Again, I take the next chapter, that is in the next class, about the experimental designs. Okay, in depth we'll discuss about the different varieties of experimental designs. So I hope you will understand this chapter, the experimental design chapter. Better refer statistics books. Okay, there they have given a lot of examples. Here I am briefly discussing about the concepts. Okay, just concepts. Okay, again it is a big subject. Okay, when you really carry out your research, at that time you take a experimental design books. Okay, thoroughly you study. But here you need not. Okay, just I will explain the concepts, okay, of the experimental design in the next class. Okay, well, we'll conclude now. Bye, take care.